I spent years writing the words that made my husband famous. His name was on every book cover. His face was on every magazine. His voice was in every interview, smiling while he spoke about his gift, his discipline, and his journey from struggle to success. People called him brilliant. People called him a genius. People called him one of the greatest authors of his generation. But behind that man, behind that smile, behind all that applause, there was me. And nobody knew until the day he died. And his own family threw me out like I was nothing. My name is Claire Bennett, and this is the story of how I built a man's empire with my own hands, and then watched him die with my truth still buried inside it. The worst part? I loved him. I loved him when we had nothing. I loved him when he was hungry, desperate, and full of dreams. I loved him when he said the first book would be our way out. I loved him when he looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "Claire, you're the only one who understands my voice." At the time, I thought that meant he believed in me. I didn't know it meant he was using me. We met in our 20s. He was charming in that quiet, broken way people find hard to resist. He had that kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He talked about literature like it was blood in his veins. He talked about injustice, about ambition, about how the world never gives decent men a fair chance. And I believed him. I believed all of it. I was working in a bookstore back then. He came in almost every day not to buy books but to talk. He said he was writing his first novel but the pages weren't coming together. He said he had the ideas, the emotion, the vision. He just couldn't make it sound right. One night, he asked me to read a few pages. I did. And I told him the truth. I said, "This doesn't sound like a real person. It sounds like someone trying too hard to sound important." He laughed. Then he looked at me like I had just saved his life. He said, "That's exactly why I need you." At the time, I thought he meant I had a good eye. I didn't know he meant he wanted my hands on the keyboard. A few weeks later, he asked me to help him edit. Then he asked me to polish the dialogue. Then he asked me to tighten the ending. Then one night, he sat across from me at our tiny kitchen table, staring at a half-finished manuscript, and said the words that changed my life forever. "Claire, just write the chapter your way. You know what I mean. You know how to make it feel real." So I wrote it. And when he read it, his eyes widened. He said, "That's it. That's my voice." That was the first lie. After that, every book got bigger. Every deal got larger. Every lie got easier. He started introducing me as his support system, his private editor, his trusted sounding board. Sometimes he called me his inspiration. Never his writer. Never his ghost. Never the woman actually bleeding into every page. At first, I told myself it was temporary. That once we were stable, once the money was better, once the pressure went down, he would tell the truth. But success did something to him. It didn't make him grateful. It made him cruel. The first time we got a royalty check big enough to cry over, he opened the envelope, looked at the number, and smiled like a man who had just won a war. Then he said, "We did it. We did it." Funny how men always say "we" when they mean me. I still remember the exact day our lives changed. He had finished his third book, the one that made him a household name. It hit the bestseller list in the first week. Morning shows called him a literary force. Newspapers called him inspiring. Fans lined up outside bookstores just to get a signature from the man who had, according to the world, written every line himself. I stood in the back of the room at one of his signings and watched a woman hand him a copy with tears in her eyes. She said, "Your words got me through my divorce." He smiled at her and said, "That means everything to me." I remember clenching my hands so hard my nails dug into my palms. Because those words? I wrote them after crying in our bathroom at 2 a.m. Because he had called me stupid for asking where the money was going. That was the life we lived. Public praise, private silence, public admiration, private humiliation. He got the interviews. I got the laundry. He got the applause. I got the leftovers. And I kept telling myself that love meant sacrifice. I kept telling myself that being invisible for the person you love was noble. I kept telling myself that one day he would look at me and say, I couldn't have done it without you. But he never did. Instead, he got better at pretending. He started appearing on panels and saying things like, writing is discipline, writing is suffering. You have to sit alone with your demons and keep going. And I would sit in the audience and think, that's rich, coming from a man who can't even write a grocery list without my help. He knew exactly how to perform humility. He knew exactly how to turn pain into branding. And the public ate it up. Then came the last book, the biggest one yet. The one that made him rich enough to buy a lake house, a luxury car, and a glass office in Manhattan with his name on the door. By then, I was exhausted, not just tired, broken. I had spent years ghostwriting entire chapters, rewriting weak sections, creating emotional arcs, shaping characters, rescuing bad endings, and making his rough ideas sound profound. I was his engine, his voice, his secret weapon. But in our house, I was still just Claire, the woman who should answer the phone, the woman who should keep quiet, the woman who should be grateful, the woman who should not ask for credit, the woman who should know her place. And still, I stayed, because I believed in the man I married before I feared the man he had become, and because somewhere deep down, I still believed love could survive dishonesty. It cannot, not forever. Then one morning, he didn't wake up. It was sudden. A heart attack, they said. One minute he was alive, the next he was gone. Just like that. No final apology, no confession, no truth. Just a body on a hospital bed and a world already mourning the genius they thought they knew. At the funeral, people called him a legend. They talked about his gift and his legacy and his unmatched talent. I stood beside the casket in black, with my hands folded so tightly they trembled. No one noticed. No one looked at the woman who had actually built the legacy they were praising. No one asked what I had lost, because to them, I had not lost a husband. I had lost a public figure, a brand, a name, and then came the family. I should have known they would show their true faces the minute the cameras left. His mother entered our home 3 days after the funeral, like a queen returning to reclaim a palace. His sister came with lawyers. His brother came with a stack of papers and a look on his face that made my stomach turn. They didn't offer condolences. They offered demands. They said I had no legal claim to the royalties. They said the estate was in his name. They said the house was a family asset. They said I could pack my things and leave by the end of the week. I remember staring at them like I had misunderstood the English language. Then his mother said, "You were his wife, Claire, not his partner in the business." Not his partner. I almost laughed, because if only she knew. If only she knew the woman standing in front of her had written the books that paid for every chandelier in that house, every suit in that closet, every expensive dinner, every award, every interview, every headline. But grief makes people bold. Or maybe greed does. I told them I wasn't leaving. His brother smirked and said, "You should be careful. We have the paperwork." That word again. Paperwork. As if truth can always be buried under a signature. They gave me 2 days to vacate the house. 2 days to erase a life that I had spent 20 years building. I was packing my clothes when I found the box. It was hidden in the bottom of his study closet, behind old files and a broken lamp. Inside were printed drafts. Dozens of them. Not just drafts. Mine. My edits. My notes. My early outlines, time-stamped digital files on old hard drives, backups, and then the thing that made my hands go cold, a notebook filled with my handwriting. My real handwriting, the one I used when I was too tired to type. On the first page in big letters I had written, "For the Bennett manuscript, Chapter 14 revision, Claire's version." I sat on the floor of that study and stared at that notebook like it was a weapon. Because in that moment I realized something. He had kept everything. Not out of love, out of insurance. He had known. Maybe not from the beginning, but long enough. Long enough to save the drafts. Long enough to keep backups. Long enough to make sure that if the day ever came when he couldn't control me anymore, he could still control the story. But he made one mistake. He underestimated the woman he buried alive. I spent the next several weeks in silence. The family thought I had given up. The public thought I was grieving. The publishers thought I was just another widow clinging to a dead husband's shadow. Nobody knew I was building a case. Every file was copied. Every timestamp was preserved. Every email, every draft, every note, every version history was saved in a secure cloud folder under a name no one would think to search for. I had backups from years ago. I had messages where he asked me to make it sound more like you. I had notes where he wrote, "This chapter is weak. Rewrite in your style." I had early manuscript versions with my edits embedded in the metadata. And I had something even better. Proof that his supposed writing process was a lie. I had documents showing he barely touched the final drafts before claiming them as his own. I had the pattern. I had the timeline. I had the story. Then came the invitation. His estate and publisher announced a grand memorial awards ceremony in downtown Chicago, honoring his extraordinary contribution to modern literature. His face would be on the giant screen. His name would be read by critics, editors, and celebrities. His final novel would receive a special posthumous award. And his family, of course, would sit in the front row and cry on cue. They did not invite me as a speaker. They invited me as a widow. A silent one. A decorative one. A woman to sit politely in the audience and clap for the man who stole her life. That was their mistake. I wore black. Not because I was mourning. Because I was preparing for war. The night of the ceremony, the hall was packed. Famous authors were there, publishers, journalists, phones, camera crews, everyone who had helped build the myth of Daniel Bennett, the literary genius. His portrait hung behind the stage. Elegant music played softly. People smiled at each other in that polished, empty way rich events always do. I sat in the third row. His family sat in the front. His mother held her chin high, already wearing the expression of a woman who believed the world had wronged her son. The host walked on stage and began with the usual words. In honor of a visionary, in memory of a master storyteller, a man whose words changed lives. Every sentence was another knife. Every lie they praised was another wound. Then the host introduced the family. His mother stood. His brother stood. His sister stood. They accepted the applause with trembling hands and sad, practiced faces. Then the host said, "And now, a few words from Mrs. Claire Bennett." A soft murmur passed through the crowd. I stood slowly, and for a second, I could feel every eye in the room on me. I walked to the stage without smiling, without shaking, without asking permission. The host handed me the microphone. I looked at the audience, at the reporters, at the publisher who had once patted my shoulder and told me I was such a devoted wife, at the family who had tried to throw me out like trash, at the giant portrait of the man who had built his life on my silence. And then I said the first line that changed everything. My husband did not write those books. The room went so quiet it felt like the air had disappeared. I heard someone in the back gasp. I heard a chair scrape. I heard the tiny sound of a phone camera starting to record. His mother's face froze. His brother frowned like he had misheard. The host laughed nervously and said, "Mrs. Bennett, of course Daniel had a process." I raised my hand. "No," I said. "Let me finish." And I did. I told them how we met, how he asked me to read his pages, how one chapter became two, how one edit became a rewrite, how one rewrite became an entire book. I told them how he praised my writing in private and erased me in public. I told them how he let the world call him brilliant while I sat in the kitchen at midnight fixing his sentences. I told them how he had used my words, my ideas, my emotions, my pain. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of printed pages. Here are the original drafts, I said. Time-stamped, authored, version, controlled, dated over the last 18 years. I held them up. I also have email chains, cloud backups, handwritten notes, and revision history from every major book he published. The crowd was no longer silent. They were shifting, whispering, looking at each other. The publisher stood up halfway. His face had gone pale. His brother muttered something under his breath. His mother said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is disgraceful." I looked at her and said, "What's disgraceful is watching a family steal from a dead woman while pretending to mourn a dead man." That hit the room like a slap. I could feel the tension rise. The host tried again. "Mrs. Bennet, are you accusing?" "I am not accusing," I said. "I am proving." Then I looked toward the screen operator at the side of the room, and I nodded. The first file appeared. A manuscrit page. Then another. Version after version. My edits. His comment. My handwriting in the margins. His request for rewrites. The progression was undeniable. The audience leaned forward. A few people pulled out their phones. A journalist near the front whispered, "Oh my God." Then I showed the email. One of many. A message from him. Sent 4 years earlier. It said, "Need your version of the ending. Mine sounds flat. Yours has the soul." I let the sentence hang there. Then I said, he knew exactly what he was doing. His brother jumped to his feet. "Turn that off," he shouted. Security looked confused. The host was sweating now. The publisher moved toward the stage. But I wasn't finished. I looked straight into the camera and said, "For years, I was told that a woman's work becomes less valuable when a man speaks it. Tonight, I'm done being quiet." Then I showed the final piece. The file history from the best-selling novel that had won him his greatest award. The timestamps proved I wrote entire chapters while he was away giving interviews. The metadata showed my edits came first. The earliest draft bore my full name in the document properties. And then, just to make sure nobody could twist it later, I showed a photo of the notebook I found in his closet. Me notebook. My writing. My real voice. The audience began to react in waves. First confusion, then shock, then anger, then shame. Because they understood. Not all at once, but enough. The man they had praised was built on a lie, and the woman they ignored was the source of it all. His mother stormed toward the stage, shouting, "You're a liar!" I looked at her with a calm I had earned through years of suffering and said, "No, I'm the one who finally brought the truth to the light." Security stepped in. The host stood frozen. The screen behind me still displayed my drafts. My words. My truth. And the room. That grand, beautiful room filled with expensive flowers and polished grief began to fall apart. Questions flew. Journalists shouted. Publishers stared at their shoes. One editor whispered, "We should have known." No, they should have asked. They should have cared. They should have noticed that every great story needs a real voice behind it. But they didn't. Because fame makes people lazy, and money makes them blind. The ceremony was over before it had even begun. By the next morning, clips of the speech were everywhere. The internet exploded. Every headline changed. Every article rewrote the myth. Publishers launched investigations. Lawyers reviewed contracts. Former assistants came forward. One by one, the walls cracked, then collapsed. The family tried to fight back, of course. They called me bitter. They called me unstable. They called me a greedy widow trying to profit from tragedy. But that didn't last, because I had the records. And records do not care about reputation. The estate froze. The royalties were suspended. The publisher issued a public apology. And after the investigation was complete, my name appeared on the covers where it should have been from the beginning. Note as an assistant. Not as a consultant, not as the woman behind the man, as the author Claire Bennett. The books were reissued. My royalties returned. My speaking requests flooded in. My face appeared on magazine covers that had once celebrated him. But the victory was not sweet. Not at first, because the truth came with a price. It came with 20 years of silence. It came with humiliation I could never fully erase. It came with memories of loving a man who fed me lies, until I almost mistook them for a life. People often ask me whether I was angry. The answer is yes, but anger was never the deepest thing. The deepest thing was grief. Not for him, for me, for the young woman who believed love meant disappearing, for the wife who thought loyalty meant surrender, for the writer who handed away her soul because she was told that being chosen was enough. It was never enough, and I need every woman listening to hear this. Being useful is not the same as being loved. Being hidden is not the same as being protected. Being praised behind closed doors is not the same as being respected in the light. I spent half my life writing the words that made another person rich. I spent years shrinking myself so someone else could look tall. I spent too long believing that if I was patient enough, loyal enough, quiet enough, the truth would somehow reward me. But truth does not reward silence. Truth waits, then it walks onto the stage. And when it does, everything changes. Today, my name is on every book again. The royalties are mine. The awards are mine. The legacy is mine. And the life I built out of my own pain finally belongs to me. As for his reputation, it never recovered. The man they mourned became a cautionary tale, a fraud in a tailored suit, a ghostwriter's ghost, a reminder that some legends are just theft with good lighting. And me? I am still here, no longer silent, no longer invisible, no longer his shadow. I am the woman who wrote the books. I am the woman they tried to erase. And I am the woman who stood on that stage and took her life back. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not shouting